Okay, good morning everyone. That little video was just to attract your attention and just one or two more people to sit down. There we go. Oh, thank you. Excuse me, for those that don't know me, my name's Phil Austin. I'm chairman of Jersey Sport. So I'd like to welcome you all here this morning. I know one or two of you were scheduled to come. We were going to hold a session on Monday lunchtime. In fact, it didn't prove very popular, so we cancelled that. So I know one or two of you perhaps had to change your arrangements to come this morning, so we're very grateful for that. This morning we're going to try and keep this to an hour because we know you've got other things to do. And the purpose of this morning really is to give you our perspective on what we think needs to be done around the area of sport and active living. We think it's a really important part of what government does and what government should be doing. And so we're going to be putting our views forward to you. And we're happy to answer any questions along the way. I'm going to start for about 10 minutes just to give you a little bit of background about Jersey Sport, what we do, how we came into being. I know one or two of you will have heard this before, so please be patient with me because there are a number of here who won't know the background to this and what our role is in this, and therefore what our mandate is in standing here before you today, putting this forward. I'm going to talk not about all of these things, but a number of these things about Jersey Sport. And I'll start with the origin of Jersey Sport. Jersey Sport was established in the middle of 2017 by the government as an arm's length organisation. And in, I think it was 2015, the government commissioned a consultation amongst the sports community of Jersey saying, how do we want sport to be run in the island going forward? And that was a very wide-ranging consultation run by KKP, the consultants. The upshot of that, in summary, was that we want sport to be taken out of government and run by an independent body, which became Jersey Sport. And myself, excuse me, and three other directors, we set up a shadow board. Steve Law, who's here today, Ed Dobney were here from the beginning. We set up a shadow board in 2016, moved the sports department, if you like, out of government, set up Jersey Sport, and away we went, recruited Katrina as CEO in the beginning of 2017, and away we went. I'll talk about structure in a moment. We're funded predominantly by government. So for the first 3 years of our existence, our budget was 1.15 million, which was exactly the same as the department had when it was in, I think it was Education, Sport and Leisure at the time, was it? Yeah. So the department, so we took that budget, we had that budget for 3 years. That has increased a bit as we've put on more delivery programs, and Katrina will talk a little bit about that later on. We operate really under two brands, Jersey Sport and Move More. The Jersey Sport brand is probably associated with what we would call organised sport. So rugby, football, cricket, netball, tennis, the organised sport where we're dealing with clubs and associations. Move More is probably more about individual stuff, getting people who aren't active, getting people who are a little active, more active. And our constituents, if you like, within that range from 5 to 95. And again, if we have time, Katrina will run through some of the programs that we do. That's a very wide-ranging and very important part of what we do. So when we talk about sport, generally, we're talking about sport and active living and the whole things that, around that. We sort of operate out on two strategies. We've got, over here, we've got Inspiring and Active Jersey. And that's a strategy which has been adopted by government. It was commissioned by government and written by Jersey Sport. And we put that forward to government, and it was debated in the House, and that's been adopted as the strategy. It's been produced to tackle the issue of inactivity within the island. Jersey Sport will drive this strategy forward. And the mission is to increase physical activity in the island by 10% by 2030. And again, Katrina will touch on some of these things in her bit. Inspiring Active Places, again, now a government strategy, government policy. That talks about the infrastructure, the sporting infrastructure, the buildings and so on and so forth. And that's already underway. Some of you will see that program has started. Changes are already being made to Springfield, to Oakfield. I think La Rocquier is maybe next, Katrina. So that started, and Jersey Sport has been commissioned to sort of project manage that. When I say Jersey Sport, that's through Katrina, who has a lot of expertise around the area of sports facilities and sports facility management. So we're very involved in that. Katrina is right at the forefront. I sit on one of the committees. Steve Law sits on another committee. And we're representing, if you like, the sporting community in the development of all these facilities. And that's great. And I think, again, we'll touch on it later, that's 100 million over a 10-year program to enhance the sporting and active living type of facilities. So how is Jersey Sport structured and our governance? Well, there's a trust at the top, a non-charitable purpose trust at the top. We have 3 trustees who we meet with at least twice a year to talk them through what we're doing, and they make sure that we're adhering to what we're supposed to be doing under the trust deed. And we have a company below it, Jersey Sport Limited. That's the same structure as Visit Jersey have, as Digital Jersey have, as Jersey Finance have. So it's a well-tried and tested structure that works for sort of arm's length organisations in Jersey. We then have the board below that. We now have 8 members on the board. We had 4 originally, as I said earlier. After 5 years or so of operation, we've started to refresh the board, so 2 stepped down last year. We've got 4 really good people from different walks of life come onto the board, and we'll continue that refreshment. Our governance, if I say so myself, is really, really good. We've spoken to the Auditor and Controller and Auditor General, who likes what we're doing, likes our reports. We're very transparent in anything we do. We sign a partnership agreement with the government, and that sets out every year what we're going to deliver. So we put in a bid for money, and we say, right, and this is what we're going to deliver against it. And Katrina and I will meet with government on a quarterly basis to go through that and show how we're meeting those targets or not, and if not, why not. So every year we bid for money, and if we get it, most of what we spend that on is on delivery. And then on a sort of operational level, we have 4 committees, a commercial committee, grants advisory committee. We look after things like travel grants for sport. We have an audit and risk committee and a remuneration and nominations committee. So that's the background to it. Are there any questions there before I moved on? That was a very quick run through what we do, but I thought it was just important to just put into perspective where we stand on this. We see ourselves as representing sport, as being the advocates for sport. We are constantly in communication with sport, getting feedback both ways, and that seems to work very, very well. Any questions then at all about how we operate? Yes. Yeah.
Any chance you could just run through your funding and whether you think you're getting sufficient? I imagine it's government funding.
Most of our funding is have you got anything in your slides about funding?
I haven't, but I can cover that if you wish.
Katrina will cover that off in a bit more detail. Most of what we get is government funding. We do get some third-party funding. We've done a number of separate projects where we've gone out to the private sector, and we have a sort of, schedule of programs we want to deliver, and we go around the private sector and say, are you interested in any of these? And so we've had a number of those that we've delivered. Probably the biggest one was the profile was the Dame Kelly Homes Trust, who we got over to help with disadvantaged kids in schools and so on and so on.
So you do take on sponsors?
Absolutely, for private fundings, yeah. And we want to do more of that, to be honest, yeah.
Okay, nice answer.
Yeah.
Do you get any money from the UK lottery to help the sport? Because I know that in the UK, that the lottery just give an awful lot of monies to sport. Do we get any of that?
We get nothing from the UK lottery. We're now beginning to get some from Jersey Lottery, Channel Islands Lottery, Jersey Lottery.
Yeah. We don't qualify because we don't take part in the UK lottery system. That's due to legal issues in Jersey's. Somebody better educated than me can tell you. But the Channel Islands Lottery, sport is now a benefactor of that, and that comes out to sport through the Jersey Community Foundation. So they will receive grant applications from sports or from anybody wanting to do sport and physical activity. It can be scout groups, it can be a whole range of things, and they make awards in our sector.
So that's quite new, yeah.
What is your state grant and how much extra do you think you need to increase your productivity?
Well, question. We're
So-
just forgotten.
Yeah.
It's about 2 million at the moment.
Yeah.
But
So
we
2
just
point, in this current year, we've been in a period in the last government plan that's been really challenging because of COVID. We obviously had to slow all of this down. So we were in a growth period based on the strategy. We're at 2.1 million this year. The vast majority of that is all about delivery. So I've yet to come up with a way to teach swimming lessons to the primary school kids without a swimming teacher. So one of the things that we often get said was, what happens to all that money? You know, like, why have Jersey Sport got so much staff? And it's because we actually, the vast majority of what we do, very few admin staff within Jersey Sport, we've got a really lean structure, is the delivery staff. So we have a whole range of people go out and take all the GP referral programs, the swimming lessons in schools, bikeability. So in our era it was cycle proficiency, but now called bikeability, to year groups in primary schools. We teach a whole range of PE lessons in primary schools, but we also have a major volunteer workforce that deliver our programs with us as well. So that's the main thing, is we, unlike some of the other arm's lengths where they get given a sum of money and then they decide, you know, how they will solve the issues that they face, we actually more have a service level agreement. So they say, right, you can have this money, but we need you to provide all the curriculum swimming lessons, we need you to provide the GP referral pathway from clinical health, etc. So that's how we work.
That lady was just first, if I may.
Can I just ask, the facility that's been built by the airport recently, was that anything to do with you?
Strive. Yeah, no, that's private. Yeah.
So Move More is obviously more health orientated rather than the benefits of sport and coordination and teamwork. So that is, to me, that's a big pre-healthcare issue. And also there's in there, as I was speaking to Ed earlier on, there's a massive issue about diet, diabetes, etc., which are going to be the biggest issues coming up. What support do you get as that as being a pre-healthcare?
Yeah. So that, part of the grant, as I mentioned earlier, is for our Move More GP referral and our Move More adult activity classes. So that one GP referral kicks off when a clinician feels that the person no longer requires a clinical environment, but would benefit from continuing their physical activity. It also kicks in where a GP, or maybe it might be a mental health practitioner, a social worker, thinks that that adult could benefit. They're not quite at crisis point yet. We're trying to prevent them reaching that, and that physical activity would be helpful for whatever circumstance they find themselves in. The Move More classes are about the people that have been through that programme and keeping them active and giving them a low-cost option to continue to be active. But you can also come straight into them, so you don't have to come through the pathway. You can jump straight into our pay-as-you-go classes at any point. So we're working very closely with our public health. So I think one of the biggest changes for us recently has been the emergence of a proper public health department. Before COVID, they had about 2 members of staff in that department, and we all worked very closely together, but with very limited impetus. Now our friends in public health really understand what the role of sport and physical activity has to play in the overall improvement of health. And that's a game changer for us, because what we're able to do then is look at how we support sports clubs to do part of that work as well as what they do very, very well, which is competitive sports, and increase our range of programmes. So in our bid, which will come forward in the next government plan, what we will be doing, to answer this gentleman's point, is ask for some more funding to try and increase the programmes that specifically tackle those that are least active, and as I'm about to go on to, those where there is a clear and obvious social imbalance in terms of their access to sport and physical activity. So I would consider ourselves, there is so many great private options in Jersey if you can afford them, and sports clubs cost quite a bit to join as well. What we are is the social provision of that, so we want to try and pivot ourselves to be much more targeted to those who wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity, and that requires funding, because what we want to try and do is make that as low cost as we can, or free at source, so that price isn't one of the barriers. There's still many other barriers, but we can make sure price isn't one.
I mean, health is really important and Katrina works very closely with them. We now have a doctor on our board, and we have the CEO of dementia on our board as well. So those, we're really close to all that stuff. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so your governance, so you are a business and a charity, or are you, you're both?
We have a charitable trust on the top,
Yeah.
and we work to that's purpose, but we have a limited company down below through which we run the operation on a day-to-day basis.
Right,
Yep.
so your directors are salaried?
No
They're
salary.
voluntary?
All voluntary, yeah, and have been from day one. Yeah. So we have paid employees like Katrina, but all the board is voluntary. Yeah.
How does Jersey compare with other jurisdictions in terms of its area of amenity space and sports facilities?
Well, you've been to the Isle of Man recently. Keep it brief, Katrina, because we've got to get on. Yeah.
Not great, is the honest answer, particularly in open space. So there is UK parameters of how much open space you should have per population. We say that figure was 10. We decided we've got lots of beaches and we'll just make it 4 here, and we haven't even reached the 4. So, and that they're not real figures. That's me just using that as an analogy. So, open space really poor. Sports facilities in massive need of revamp and investment, without a shadow of a doubt.
I'm standing in central St Helier and I'm really looking to get more open space so that people have access to small parks and gardens, pocket parks within 5 minutes of where they live.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing. You come home with your kids from school, you've got 15 minutes. You don't want a park that's 20 minutes away. You want something that's nearby.
I'm going to touch on that in my
Speech.
bit.
Okay, we'll get on to that. What, 2 more questions maybe. I'll take one here and then, go. Oh, 3 more. Go on.
I like the joke about let's have a moment for all the people stuck in traffic on their way to the gym where they're going to ride a stationary bicycle. Do you see yourselves as having a role in the climate strategy, the climate roadmap towards active travel?
Absolutely.
Very much so.
Is that in your presentation?
Yep, we commissioned a strategy and we have a whole ambition in there around active travel. We work very closely with our infrastructure colleagues who they do the hard side, the infrastructure, we do the soft side, the training, getting people out riding, our Breeze programme, our guided rides programme, so I'll come on to that later.
Philip, I think.
You need to get on, and so this is probably a question that may well be covered. I'm interested to understand the funding model. Is it year to year, and is there any differentiation between revenue funding, in other words, the core funding you need year to year, versus the capital or one-off funding? So maybe you'll cover that in your remarks.
Yeah, probably not, but I'll just quickly cover it now. Technically, it's 4 years funding linked to the government plan, but what I've discovered is there isn't really such a thing. We wrangle it every year, and we actually have 2 years this time, which is the first time in our 5 years that we've got 2 years, so that's a step in the right direction. In terms of we don't actually have any capital funding as an organisation, we don't operate the sports facilities, that's still in government. So the capital required for the new builds, which we are programme managing, would come through government, not Jersey Sport. So we don't have capital as such.
So in other words, there's a big issue with funding in going hand to mouth, year to year.
Yes.
There is for us, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. We can't plan beyond a year or so in terms of what we're delivering.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to stop it there and move. Oh, I'm sorry, go on quickly. I promised
There'll
you.
be more
quickly.
questions after my bit.
Yeah.
Just wanted to ask you in relation to the grant in supporting sport people going abroad, representing Jersey in international competition. How does that work? How do they have access to, and is it just athletic sports supported, or any kind of sport activity?
So we get a sum of money from the government, which is ring fence for travel grants, what's called travel grants, and we administer that. Steve Law, who's here, runs that committee. We administer that against tight criteria. So sport, it's not just athletics, it's all sports going off the island. I think it's age up to 23, is it?
Yeah.
Young people up to age 23. They can apply for grants to take a team off, a rugby team off or whatever, or an individual. They apply to Jersey Sport under the criteria. We look at it. If we think it meets the criteria, etc., we can grant funding to it. That's ring-fenced from the rest of our grants.
Yeah. It's fair to say, though, this year I think we awarded about 125 plus some grants to Island Games and Commonwealth Games. The applications, Steve, were just under 300, I think. 300,000 was the what we received in applications, but we only had 125 to give out. So that gives you some scale of the issue.
Okay, we're only about 25 minutes behind
Cool.
schedule.
It's all right.
Just
I'll
let me
wing
introduce
through.
Katrina. Let me introduce Katrina, who don't know her. Katrina's been with us since day one. A really high profile and important appointment for us. Katrina was up in Scotland doing sports management, sports development, really experienced in this. So much so, as I said earlier, that the government here now have sort of grabbed her. She still works for us, but the government use her very much so as an advisor, a consultant almost, on all their sports facilities and so on and so forth. So we're really pleased to have Katrina. Her and the team here, some of whom are here, have done a fantastic job. So we're going to run through today some hard messages here for you as election candidates, some really hard messages to take away, and our thoughts on how, if you get into government, when you get into government, and what you could and should be doing.
Yeah,
Katrina.
thank you, Chair. Jersey Sport's just gone through an exercise, and we involved all of our staff team in this in terms of creating a corporate plan and say, right, well, okay, we know what we need to do. We've got to get this inspiring and active Jersey. We've got to turn this curve of physical inactivity. What do we need to do as an organisation to make sure that everything that we're doing is pointed towards what I spoke about earlier, which is that we are the targeted social provider. So what we've done is we've said, well, you know, sports development's part of our DNA. That's why we exist, and you know, this demonstrates that really, really well. So what we've done is we've looked at, like, what do we need to do around about organised sport, and really, to give you an idea, we have very limited funding for sports development. Most of our funding is more onto the move more in the health side, and we're trying to address that, and we have managed to address that through better efficiencies and what we do within our overall grant. But we want to go again in the next government plan, have more resources to support the sports community to do what we think they can do, which is a really important role around social inclusion and health. Our main role is, and this is what we're doing today, is we advocate for the benefits for sport and physical activity. We advocate for why it's an important part of what you will hopefully, or you're all hoping to be involved in, which is the next government term. I don't stand before you here today banging a drum saying sport and physical activity is the only thing and you should do that. I know that this island has many bigger issues to face in its next government term. The cost of living crisis, the housing crisis, to name but two, a hospital to build. But what I do say to you here today is that this is one of the strongest enabling strategies that you are likely to be able to have to underpin what you want to achieve as a government in the next term. So what does it do? Well, it joins communities together. It basically keeps our, you know, the health and well-being of our population well. And we know that if we have islanders who are mentally and physically strong and well, that we are much more likely to grow a vibrant economy. We're much more likely to recover from COVID. We're much more likely, God forbid, to do well through another pandemic or another health issue than we were. And I think that's the main game changer, is that realisation that if you take your eye off the public health and the health of your constituents, your islanders, then you do store up a lot of issues that impact everything else that you're trying to achieve as an island. So increasing participation, very much a cornerstone of what we want to do. What we really want to do there is say, we want to move 10%, yes, but actually when we look at that segmented down, what we really want to do is drive some of the inequality out of these activities. We want to make sure that everyone has access to physical activity, and we want to target those that are least active and move them to being fairly active, and then the fairly active to active. We want to be data driven. Jersey's not a great place for data and collection of data that allows you to, as a business or a charity, whatever you want to do, to point your activity in the right direction. We're changing that curve at the moment. We're working hand in hand with the Economic Department on a major study which will kick off in the next probably month, looking at the social value of sport and physical activity, why it is important that we continue to invest in this area, and really to get those enabling factors that I spoke about earlier. It's all about behaviour change, and this is why it's not an easy thing to do. So nowhere has the golden bullet of answer to how you make a population more physically active. So there's lots of factors, and we need to use the data to find out what's going to work in Jersey, and that's why it's important. But what we're looking to do is change behaviour, and that's why we are a very labour-intensive business, because sometimes we have to have 3 or 4 conversations just sitting over coffee with someone to understand what they experience in their life And why me saying to them, you should be more physically active, is like, oh, wait a minute. I'm just trying to hold down 3 jobs and bring up 3 kids in a bed sit. So, you know, now you're telling me I've got to be physically active. So what we have to do is really labour intensive, and we have to use behavioural change modelling and concepts behind everything that we do. And the staff are excellent at that. All of our staff are behavioural change trained, and really looking at the individual, and, you know, like not being one of these soapbox mantras that say, you need to do this. Well, that's all very well if your life's lovely. But how do you do that when you face challenge on a day-to-day basis? And to do all of this, Jersey Sport needs to be a well-governed, sustainable business model, which I have to say I've got an excellent board, and you know, that's something that we do well. We are a charity, and we have had some real good success in raising private funds, and we want to continue to ramp that up as we move forward, because, you know, we know that government has many competing priorities for funding, and we want to be able to help government by raising funds from the private sector. And there is a lot of support for this area in the private sector, and that's something that we want to do more of. So we've talked a little bit about the strategy, so I'm not going to dwell on that, but just picking out that it says "and fairer society" there deliberately, because we genuinely believe in the mantra that we are the social provision provider of these services. As I said earlier, plenty of private options, but how do we make sure that everyone has access? Move More Jersey, we've spoken about. That's about getting people active. They are really, again, labour intensive intervention programmes. So they're not sort of programmes that you put on and people will just come anyway, like putting on your class programme at Strive, and, you know, members will come and be active, or at the active gyms. These are ones where we have to do an awful lot of work to get people just through the door. One of the best ones we've done recently is in partnership with Mind Jersey, with grant money from the dormant bank accounts through Jersey Community Partnership. And what we did there was Mind identified people who had been really socially isolated through COVID and were really struggling to re-engage. And the first few sessions were just meet and greet sessions before we even introduced physical activity. Then we introduced the physical activity element, and some of the comments were great. They said suddenly, and it was actually not about the physical activity, that was a sideshow. I realise I'm not the only one that's feeling like this right now, because I'm with 12 other people doing physical activity who have also felt that petrified of COVID and really worried about what it was going to do. So some great models there. We also did, with the same funding, buggy walks. And that was because a lot of new parents suddenly felt very isolated because COVID had meant they couldn't go to prenatal, antenatal, meet new mums, meet friends, meet other people. And that was also very successful. Sport we've talked about as well. What we're really looking to do there is work with the sports clubs, drive you know, really good standards of governance, work with them on whole sports plans. So every sport's at a different stage in this island. You know, do they want to have more high performers? Do they want to have more grassroots? Whatever it is that they want, the team here, Libby's at the back there, they work with them to say, well, what do you want to have in your plan? What we're trying to do is have a closer alignment then to the lottery proceeds to help sports gain that funding to then deliver those plans. And what we're pushing them on is to say that there has to be more diverse backgrounds of the people accessing sports clubs than there is just now. Inspiring Active Places is the government strategy for investment into sports facility and infrastructure. What we've done from the start there is say, okay, that's great, and you know, you would expect me to say we need sports facilities. But what we have is a unique opportunity for what I would call true community asset buildings. So we're hopefully going to put one in town, we're hopefully going to put one out east, and we're hopefully going to put one out west. I can't think of any other project building-wise that will come along in the next 40 years that has an opportunity to create community asset buildings on every geographical spread of the island. That means there's a golden opportunity for the well-being aspects of these buildings as well as the sports bits. We know we need a sports hall, we know we need an AstroTurf pitch, that's fairly straightforward. But could that area benefit from a community library? Would that area benefit from community rooms that could be used by the Best Start initiative for young tots, the Grey Youth Club as we call it? What can we do with these buildings? It means that it's not just about the people that are mad about sport. Every islander has a connection to something that goes on in those buildings, and really see the government invest in that quality of life, that sense of community spirit, these 10-minute neighbourhoods where you don't have to cross the tunnel to go to a sports facility. It's out there east. And actually, in terms of the east with Loroche, which hopefully would be the first facility, which would be dual use with the school, and potentially a revamp of FB, it really is an East of Ireland regeneration project rather than sport. So I'd ask you all to think about that as we start to bring forward the plans. We've put a lot of housing out there recently. The amenities didn't necessarily follow. We're sort of doing it the wrong way round, but now what we're looking at is a unique opportunity to follow with the amenities that growing and vibrant population require. So in terms of sport and physical activity, it's not great. So what I would say is we're all very committed. The team that stand here today and the ones that couldn't be here today, we get up every day excited about what we do because we get to change people's lives, and we get some lovely comments back, and slightly frustrated that we can't do more, I think is the honest thing. So 48% of adults, 82% of children are not active enough to support health. When you look at children and you look at those that are doing an hour a day, 4 to 6 days a week, it does actually jump up a little bit. So it's not as another 42%. So it's not as bleak as that statistic might look at. But then when you look at that in terms of gender, in terms of disability, and this one, which just keeps me up at night, the children are asked in the school survey to rate themselves whether they think they're to be well off, average, or not well off. If they rated themselves as not well off, and we then looked at those who are physically active, those that play sport, they are 30% less likely to be regularly playing sport if you've rated yourself as not well off. That then correlates a lot to social housing. So we're getting something very, very wrong here. And we do believe that working with the schools where children are there every day and after school particularly is a unique opportunity to take the pressure off already pressured parents, not because people don't want their children to play sport, it's because they struggle with capacity to be able to do that, whether that's time or finance or any other reason. We also know that physical activity has major factors. So we've got women are 9% less likely than men to meet the guidelines, 6% few girls meet the guidelines. In the UK, that's flat. There's no gender difference. But that's after 15 years of huge investment in closing that gender gap. Everyone aware of the This Girl Can campaign that Sport England have run? World-renowned campaign to get girls into sport, women into sport of all different ethnic backgrounds. And they've managed to be successful. So we need to have a serious look at that and look at the gender imbalance. And children who perceive themselves as not well off are 17% less likely to have visited an open space regularly. So to the gentleman's point about needing more open space, we know that COVID, if you lived in a rural parish, great, 2 hours of nothing else you can do, can't go to the cinema, can't go to McDonald's, can't do anything else, let's go for a walk, lovely family time, beautiful family time, we'll treasure it. I had primary age kids at that point, treasure that time when I look back. Not if you live in St Helier in a highly densely populated area. Oh, and by the way, you've been told not to get in a bus because that's one of the highest risk points. And then a beacon of inequality was shown in the fact that we don't have enough open space in our densely populated areas. And we're not taking the opportunities to do something about that, such as South Hill area and wonderful park there that's been let go. How do we bring that sort of stock back in? We've got our over 65s, we know are less likely to be active, and there's some reasons for that. But actually, look at a lot of 65 to 80-year-olds are pretty nimble, pretty fit, and we need to do a little bit more to support them to be active. Low income, disability, life limiting illnesses, and we can, as a direct difference in physical activity rates of those from Portuguese background, Polish background, and we wouldn't say there's any difference. If we check the stats back in those countries, you wouldn't see a major issue. That's more to do with cost of living, disposable time, etc., than I think it is any cultural difference. And that just shows you that we've got work to do in those communities to make sure that we can support them to be active. One of the ones that we least like the most, So adults living in social housing, 50% less likely to play sport and 19% less likely to be active than those that own their own home. And 35% of children, 35% drop in children playing sport when they hit year 8. And that's a lot to do with when they can make their own choices and parent doesn't say you are going to swimming and that's it. But also what they say there is they don't find it fun. So what do we get wrong in sport when it gets serious, it gets competitive, it gets you'll be there twice a week or I'll drop you. There is a market for that recreational, just come and have fun and enjoy your sport. And that's one of the things that Libby and the team are working with. We've got quite a traditional product in terms of sports delivery here, and we need to look at more flexible ways to deliver that. So very quickly, because I'm running out of time, well-versed, most of you have turned up today, so I'm going to assume that you're well-versed in why and the benefits. But just a quick one, 10% enhancement in social capital. For every £1 you spend, these are English stats, we will have our own, when we do this piece of research, we will actually have our own figures on this soon for Jersey, which is going to be great. £1 investment in sport generates a £4 return. This is staggering. Active Islanders enjoy better health outcomes, so 42% reduction in type 2 diabetes. I hate to think what type 2 diabetes costs to treat over, if somebody contracts it and what that costs. 30% reduction in clinical depression, the cost of treating that. Reduction in coronary heart disease, reduction in dementia. And then just 20% improvement in general health. But also, it's just about how you feel. So, people who are physically active and meet the guidelines are less anxious, they're happier, they feel more satisfied, and they feel more worthwhile. So, huge benefits to the individual in the here and now. It's quite hard sometimes to sell them, and you might not get this later in the future. And they're like, well, I might not get it anyway. But, so selling them and what it means for them right here and now is important. 9% of, this is staggering, 9% of adults regularly volunteer in sport and physical activity. 9% of the Jersey population volunteer every week in sport and physical activity. And that's been, don't ask me how they've calculated this, but that's been said, well, that's worth, what that does for that individual and how it makes them feel and how it makes them feel connected to their society is worth, paying them an extra £2,663 a year. Playing sport and being active is calculated as having an annual worth to individuals of 1,274. And again, we'll have Jersey data on this soon. So the benefits are clear, and that's what I mean about this enabling of other agendas. So, in summary, really, the priorities. So what we'll be doing now, and I'm actually doing this as we speak, what we're looking at is the next submission to the government plan, so the next 4 years, which you will all, if you're elected, start reviewing as one of your first jobs, I believe, will be to get into the new Common Strategic Policy and in the government plan. And we've directly built these priorities round about that data and what we need to try and change. And that's where you see the data led. We know what some of the issues are and how we move this forward. And this is in the booklets that we've given out today. So we want to do a lot around sports development. We want to increase sports development funding to allow us to grow sport and making participation more accessible to all islanders. So that's the key. It's not money for sport for business as usual. It's really challenging sport to look at how it can try and attract people from different backgrounds. To the point earlier, we do not at the moment have any resource beyond a £60 travel grant to support our talented performers. And there is, well, so what? But there is a direct correlation between athletic success and getting others at grassroots to get involved. And the Serena Guthrie impact, as we've seen, Serena's coming back onto Island to lead forward netball here. And, that's going to be, I'm just so excited about what that's going to do for netball. So we want to establish a sports performance programme that allows us to support our talented athletes, our top athletes, and really use them round about the identity of Jersey and the identity project that's going on and the importance that sport plays. We're going to go to the Commonwealth Games shortly and make sure that we have that ability to support our most talented athletes. We need to support the volunteer workforce. So we want to grow sport, but we've already got a limited amount of volunteers. So we need to get more people engaged in volunteering sport, particularly from the backgrounds that we're trying to get involved in sport. We've got a 2-year lag. We could do barely any CPD in 2 years. So we've had a massive programme of safeguarding updates because nobody could train pretty much for 2 years. Massive backlog in coaching qualifications, so much so that our funding for that was massively oversubscribed, and we're currently making a bid to the lottery to get some more money to make sure that we can do a bit of a catch up in that. But we really need to invest in that area. Aspiring active places we've talked about, and we want to push on, help government push on with the delivery of Loroche, and really show the island that's the quality of community asset facility this government believes you deserve. And as a school, it could be transformational for that school. And looking at FB and what we can do there to combine sports and make it more open for the community to enjoy. Active travel and open spaces. So these gentlemen, massive part of what we want to do. We won't necessarily do this. We're a partner in this, but we believe it to be a priority, because if we can get people actively travelling, we can get them to their half an hour, 150 minutes if you're an adult, an hour a day if you're a child, much easier, because that's time that you're consuming anyway, getting to work, getting to school, so it's not extra time that you've got to find. So we want to invest in active travel and initiatives and support islanders to actively travel and improve our access to open spaces. Move more, increasing participation. We talked about that earlier. We want to really focus on targeted intervention that helps those that are least active get active. And as I said earlier, that's a labour-intensive process. So, it's not easy to look at this as a headcount game. Move more, health improvement. Again, those real clinical intervention works. And we're already talking to the lead clinicians in ortho and obesity in terms of the role of these programs pre-operation, potentially any gastric band thing, which is to say, how can we help them demonstrate they can already sustain lifestyle changes before we put them through a major invasive operation. So very closely linked to health and what it is that we're trying to do there. And then move more schools and children, and this is crucial. How we support the schools, now not necessarily in curriculum because we've got enough to cram into the curriculum, but how could we have an earlier start, a later finish, a lunchtime, a science lesson that takes them for a walk around the playground to learn, And what we forget is we don't need to be running around sweating to hit our guidelines. We just need to be walking. Moderate walks, totally fine to get that health benefit. So sometimes we overplay. It's got to be sport. It's got to be really intense if it doesn't. The other thing we want to do is have an active teen fund. So that's just what we've called it for just now. You saw that drop off, year 8 to year 12, absolutely plummets. So things like the skate park, vital for that teenage age group who are hard to engage in formal structured activity. They don't consume anything longer than a 30-second clip on TikTok. So how can we make sport more bite-sized, and how do we get them engaged?
Politicians like that as well.
So that's what we want to do in terms of priority. And we're building all of these into the next government plan. And yes, it will have a price tag, but it might have, I don't know, I haven't actually worked it out yet, but for talking sake, £1 million extra. When you look at that return on investment earlier, and you look at what we need to do, and you look at some of the money that's needed to solve other things, it's actually, I think, really, really good value for money. But I would say that, wouldn't I? So I'm not going to go through these, but this is all that we deliver currently on the 2.1 million. And as you can see, they're all delivery programs where staff are out in the ground. So red is more sports related or core, and the lighter ones are the move more. So, and I've spoken about through most of these. The other one just pick up is we do the swim safe, which is we take every year 5 to the sea. Sometimes the first time some of these children have ever been on a beach or in the sea, which is incredible. And we teach them about tides and safety, and that's an RNLI programme, which we deliver in partnership with the Bodie Foundation. And then in the adult side of things, we do a lot around sports. We actually do some work in the prison as well, looking at physical activity and sports coaching and leadership for some of the prisoners there. So we have a broad range of things, and then lots of move more activities. So a lot of which are delivered by volunteers. We have over 150 volunteers who deliver our programmes. And that's it. We can take some more questions now.
Well done,
for a
Katrina.
winter. Sorry.
Well done.
Gentleman here first, I think.
I'd like to throw out a challenge to you. Okay?
I love challenges.
So, I'm in Central St Helier, and I'd like to extend Millennium Park. There's two aspects to this. Number one, the JSPCA have a plan on the table to sell some land off to Angel, which will help us with our plans for more social housing. That land extends up to Victoria College. So imagine you have a school child who lives in the centre of town, they can walk through Millennium Park, find a safe route over St Saviour's Road, and then up through that country walk. Gives you direct access not just to Victoria College, but to Girls' College and Hollywood. So that's one aspect. Probably more importantly from a sports point of view, what I'd like to do at Millennium Park is create a running track around the park. Not necessarily for competitive running, but for exercise running. Would Jersey Sport be able to help and advise us to do that?
We would definitely be able to help and advise. That's one of the reasons why I've been brought in to help the government with their sports facilities. So absolutely in terms of how you make an active park, because you can have parks that are not necessarily particularly active, and things like trim trails round outside are ideal and encourage that. So yes, we absolutely could. The other things is I do know that my IHE colleagues in sustainable transport have already drawn out a cycling network from bus station through that area that you're talking about, around the new Odeon, or what was the Odeon now Premier Inn, I think, up that way. And that's something else that I would, we would really advocate for, because trying to get our school children safely from centre of town, whether they've bussed in or whether they live there, up to all of the schools and the colleges that sit up there, that is a priority for us.
One of my other aims
Yep.
to make St Helier a walkable and cyclable city, particularly for
Yes.
children. And that's something that infrastructure ministers over the years have failed to do. So let's make that happen.
Great.
Thank you.
So I'm going to try. There's so many hands. Phil, I could do a hand here, but we'll go to Mark
Okay.
first.
Just quickly, what do you do or what can you do with companies to help them with their staff to get more involved in sport?
Yeah, so that is actually part of the strategy, active workplaces. It's not a funded part yet, but we have been actively talking to Business Jersey and others about trying to get, so you probably won't be aware of this, something called Healthy Working Lives, which is a Scottish government initiative, and it's an award that business places can get for, and it's not just about physical activity, it's about mental health support, etc., etc. So we're actually, one of our directors is involved in it. There's work at play just now about active workplaces and healthy workplaces and how we implement that. We would like an officer to be able to go into a business and say, right, these are all the things that you can do with your staff, and have you thought about this and have you thought about that? We would also like to push for more stronger planning legislation about the number of showers. Let's build an office for 402 showers. Well, that's great when everyone arrives roughly about 9 o'clock. So how do we change the infrastructure to make sure that we can support active travel is another big one for us. I think we'll go, this gentleman here had his hand up for a wee while, so we'll go there. I will get you all, don't worry.
Thank you. So I'm standing for St Clement, so Rockier is quite close, and I'm very excited that we can do something there, but I'm also, let's say, quite concerned that the level of consultation will be quite low. So my question would be, are you aware as to when consultation will start? And also, what can Jersey Sport do to consult with St Clement's parishioners and the east of the island to ensure that by the time we get planning out, everyone will have seen it, and we will have that investment by parishioners that they want this to succeed, and they won't see this as something being forced upon them.
Yeah, very good question. I think we fully intend to do major consultation exercise. We're at the stage at the moment where we've spoken to key stakeholders such as the schools, such as the sports, such as the current sitting deputies and constables, and government officers. So we've done a few workshops with government officers about the opportunity for what needs to be. So should there be a library, for example, that type of thing. So what we want to do is our architects are currently just working on early stage design work, so that we want to get, so within maybe, and we'll probably, because of PERDA, it will probably be after, so August, September, that we'll come out with that sort of public consultation. But we want to actually have like at least something to show. So we're letting the architects work up a little bit with a view, to coming out and doing some major consultation around how that'll affect the area, things like transport, etc. So there definitely will be that consultation.
How broad will that consultation be? Will that just
fully
be
wide? It'll be totally public consultation.
Yeah,
so
island-wide, is it?
Island-wide, but specifically, knowing that people are in the St Clement's area as well. So yeah. lady at the back, and then I'll come down here.
I'm interested in the figures about the gender divide in sport. There's certainly a perception in Jersey, I'd say perhaps more than a perception, but give me your view on it, that we've invested an awful lot in male sports over the years, and we've actually favoured things like rugby and football, when you then have sports like netball, which is the biggest female participation sport, seemingly, some people would say, being ignored for many, many years. What Jersey sports involvement at this stage in trying to bridge that divide? How does funding look between the two? What
Yeah.
insight can you offer into that?
So there's a couple of things to just clear up there. So one is that football and rugby do have funding, but that generally comes from their English affiliation to the Rugby Association and the Football Association. So generally male sports, because of the way in which Premiership football goes and all the money that's in football, Jersey gets a kickback share of that, which funds in more. Cricket gets a major funding from the ICCC or ICCC. So a lot's come in there. None of our sports, up until the lottery funding becoming available, and we would like to have a bigger role in that lottery funding so we can be more targeted about what that's used for against the strategy. It doesn't come from government here, apart from the travel grants. That's the only funding into sport at the moment here. There is other funding being given to the rugby club, and I'm not getting into the politics of that, but that is on an economic basis. That is about, so I step away from that and say, if you want to do that because it brings visitors, that's a different agenda than what I'm involved in. And that's where I think the only other investment that I'm aware that's been given to, like rugby out with that, football's mainly comes from the English FA. So that's the thing. What we want to do with netball is work with them on their whole plan, which we're doing at the moment. We're meeting Serena on a regular basis at the moment, and then working with our friends at the community trust that have the lottery proceeds to try and persuade them that they should be funding that plan in a structured way that allows netball to grow over a period of time.
In the short term.
This gentleman, and then
I was just going to say, in the short term, plans for netball in terms of their accommodation?
Yeah, so in terms of netball, netball are secured at Les Ormes now till 2026, a possible extension on that, but definitely 2026. That was great because we were going to have to look at some kind of temporary facility. We hope, and this is all subject to funding in the government plan, because at the moment, to be clear, La Roque has no capital funding beyond the money we've got to bring forward the designs this year. So that's something that's got to go into the next round of government plans. La Roque would hopefully open some point in 2025 or early 2026, which would allow us to give Oakfield, move the sports that are going to Oakfield to La Roque, and allow netball to have the new 3-court facility up there pretty much as their main facility. So that's what we're doing there. I'm going to this gentleman and then I'll come back here.
Yes, I'm Carl Bush, candidate for St. Brellards. I've been running an active ageing project here on the island for the last 3 years, as you well know. And I'm well versed with what the barriers are to being included. I share your vision that it would be fantastic if Jersey was a place where people had a higher quality of life and well-being admired by possibly the rest of the world, where we live on average an extra 5 years in good quality. Now, one of the barriers that I want to share with you to being included is ageism. And ageism actually comes from the aged, because they don't want to be perceived as being failing and aging as previous generations. But when they get to retirement, they slow down in previous years gone by. Now we're living healthier, longer lives, and some of us actually will have to start careers again in our 50s to sustain ourselves for the rest of our lives. So your thing about the over 65s there didn't really portray the way that we feel that we're going to be seen for the rest of our living years. And I just want to finish with, isn't it wonderful that Saga advert from the UK where the guy's saying youngsters these days think we don't get up to much, and then he races off down the beach on his horse. That is the image that I think this active aging should be portraying.
Definitely. I mean, I think that one there is a statistic in terms of the way the survey is asked is in that age category. But we're very aware that you know, people will be working well into their 60s and 70s here in the next few years, and we need to look at how we're going to have this you know, ageing population which is growing every year that the statistics are done. So keeping that population active is going to be key to keeping them in their own home, keeping them in good health, and sustaining them as the age you know continues to hopefully grow, because we do want people to live longer, although it gives us lots of other challenges. Of course,
thank you. First of all, thank you very much for your presentation. It's really informative. One question maybe can't be asked now. I'd be keen to understand, and maybe other candidates too, what is the funding that looks good for you guys over the next 4 years? Can you be absolutely clear with us about what good looks like in basically achieving these objectives and fixing some of these problems? Firstly, can you give that, not now, but could you provide that, Phil, to us? Secondly, I'm standing for St Saviour, and you're going to have, for the first time, 5 deputies and 1 constable, all representing 1 parish where there are an awful lot of sports facilities there. Are you working with local authorities? We haven't mentioned, I don't think the council was once here, but are you actually breaking down, and it's an invitation, can we understand what you need from your Saviour representatives to achieve some of these objectives? Because we've got loads and loads of open spaces, loads of sports facilities that walking around the parish in the last few weeks look pretty tired, and you need some crowd initiative funding from your deputies. It's a huge opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. I think what we're looking for every parish to get behind is, you know, okay, so Larocquia might go up in St Clements, but it's a facility for all parishes in the east and the northeast of the island. So likewise, Oakfield, that, you know, is about to go into ground, you know, that will serve wider, but it sits actually just into St Saviour's. I think it's right on the line. It's right on the line. I think I checked it recently. I think it's in St Saviour's. So what we you know, want to do is just come out and speak to you. A few years ago, I did a round of all the constables and came out and met quite a few of them in their offices, and we actually cycled round the whole lot of them, which was great. So we do see each parish as having a real you know, crucial role to play in supporting what we can do in their parish, but getting behind what are often island-wide agendas and initiatives. And I know that, you know, with the way things have changed, that's slightly different, but we really do need you to get behind it. In answer to your question, you will very soon, if you are elected, our government plan will clearly lay out what funding we need in the next 4 years. We could consume more, but actually as an organisation we need to watch our own growth pattern and our own ability to deliver, because we can't, you know, if the government will say, right, there's 5 million, go, one of the biggest limiting factors, like every other organisation on this island at the moment, is recruitment and being able to get the right qualifications of staff and grow as you know, as quickly as we need to. So we have to just watch that element as well.
Why do we have to wait till the government to be elected to understand what you need financially?
You don't, but I am literally writing it as we speak. I should have it finished. If I wasn't poorly yesterday, I might have been able to tell you exactly what figures I had in that plan. So yes.
Can I ask Philip's question in a different way?
Yes.
How do we unlock the facilities we've currently got that aren't used out of hours? So schools that are closed in the evening, schools that are closed on holidays. We've got so much facilities on the island that don't get used.
Thank you for that question, because it is, I think you know, it's a bit of a bone of contention with me. I've come from a background where I managed all of Perth and Kinloch's leisure facilities, including their school estate. And we opened it, we went in at 4:30 and we opened it up ready for the public. We switched from one to the other. There's lots of tensions around that in Jersey, but it's totally achievable. Part of the IAP, the Inspiring Active Places work, which will be kicking off very, very soon, we're actually just scoping it out just now, is a review, and the first part of that is going to be around about the operation of the school estate and how can we make those facilities dual use. 100% the schools need to have priority in these facilities during the day, and they need to draw a line of when they need them to at night. Is it 5? Is it 5:30? Is it 6 o'clock? But at the moment, it's a game of head teacher, and this is no disrespect to head teachers, this is what they're up against. I make X amount of income off of that and I want to keep it. What they actually don't realise is how much it costs them to actually maintain and operate these facilities. So we just need a really sensible decision, which is actually you make 50,000 off of that, we'll give you 50,000 more wooden dollars over here, and we'll move that income over here, and we'll get the sports department to run them. So that's a piece of work that's about to kick off, and it's really important. I'm going to go here, then over here, and then here.
Because the follow on really from what Andy said is that working with the schools, why is a PE teacher just 9 to 5? Why can't they do more flexible working? Are you saying about recruitment? Your physical education teachers are already working in the schools, but with more flexible working, they could be doing more after schools, utilising their expertise in a much more cost-effective way. I don't know whether you're looking at that.
That is a can of worms in terms of unionisation and teacher contracts, and that's a whole world that it's not for me to get embroiled in. But your concept is spot on. An extension of the school day, I would be a total advocate of a school day being 8:30 till, make it slightly earlier because actually that lets the parent get to work for 9 or whatever, through to 4:30, 5 o'clock. I would have 5 days a week where people like us in the arts, culture, music come in, and your kids are told, right, you'll be on 3 o'clock, you'll do 2 sport or physical activity, you'll do a music, and you'll do an art after school, and that'll be provided by external providers. Lovely if we could make that within the school days, but I know our teaching colleagues are overworked as it is, and there would be lots of fraught issues with changing staff contracts. One thing we do want to advocate for is there is no PE teaching in our primary schools. We go in and the schools pay us to send them in really good sports coaches who deliver their PE, and we've managed in the 7 schools we're in to really drive up the standard of PE delivery. That's no disrespect to a primary teacher, but a primary teacher needs to be a scientist, a historian, a PE person, etc. And some of them are marvellous because they're sporty themselves, they really get it, and others, it's the most alien concept ever. So we work in quite a number of the schools with our coaches going in, and that's been really successful. They're under the gaze of the teacher, of course, but it works really, really well. Now I'm going to go up here and then come here and here.
In answer to Andy's question, the first hour we managed to take over a building as a youth club, and because of the bus to school, we've been able to get permission to put doors straight into the gym off our building, and it's opened in about a fortnight's time. But we could only have done that because we got $1.5 million in the fiscal stimulus fund to be able to do it. So all of this comes down to funding from the government to do it. Now we want to increase the usership of that building by putting in the winter a game called short mat bowling, which is played all over England at every leisure centre you can imagine in the winter. But it's going to cost us £20,000 to buy the mats and all the equipment to put up 6 rings. We have nowhere to go and get that money from.
You do, and I'm going to look, Libby over there will help you with a lottery application, because the lottery application allows you to bid for up to 50,000 for equipment or facility-related issues. So Libby, I'll get you to have a chat.
I wanted to finish on a story of what's happening up at the indoor bowling club. And this is a place where elderly people mostly go and play. And every day you'll find 15 to 20 people who would all be between 60 and 80. In fact, one of 90 playing bowls. Now, the bowling club paid for that building. They built it 30 years ago on a piece of land owned by the States. The States charges the bowling club £8,500 every year to rent the place. Now, that's ludicrous, because that's a provision that the government should be providing for elderly people in activity.
Yep.
And yet we've been trying to get that rent stopped, and we're told if we do that, it will create a precedent for everybody else.
Yeah,
It's absurd.
that is an issue that Jersey Sport plan to take on. We totally agree with that. I've spoken to my colleagues in Guernsey, Isle of Man, and indeed when I did very similar myself in Scotland, there were peppercorn rents, £1 a year. you're taking an asset off government's hand, you've got a fully repairing maintenance lease. Why are we charging sports clubs commercial rates? That is something we take on when we have a new sports minister and we say, look, this isn't where we need to be. These should be peppercorns because the clubs are then taking on the responsibility of the asset and actually doing you a favour. And actually probably controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway, maintaining the assets better than they would have been if they were maintained by government. So thank you. Here,
2 or 3 more, here, Katrina, yes. Because
yes,
we've got to get these people.
They've got me on my toes today, Chair.
Get out on the streets.
This gentleman here.
So first of all, space comes from wealth, and so I'm representing St Heliers Central. Lekeneve has sports centre facilities, just incredible, and St Heliers Central. What would be your priorities for that area? Because a lot of things you're talking about, economic, mental health, space, etc. What would be your priorities there?
I think there's 2 priorities. One is open space that's free, that it's accessible, because we do know that there's actually more health benefits from being active outdoors and indoors, and we shouldn't forget that given the climate that we've got. Secondly, we are working with Jersey Development Company around about their waterfront initiative, and they will obviously, they need to provide replacement leisure and sports facilities there. We will be working to provide them with a briefing saying to them, this is what government needs for that area, and these are the facilities that we want to have. There'll be a bit of a bun fight because they want more land for the housing, but what I'll need from you as a government is to say, well, wait a minute, if we're going to allow this, we need this amount of community asset, and therefore, that's the conditions of it, because we want to make sure that some of the things that we've lost or will lose from Fort Regent that haven't yet been replaced, such as squash, and fitness, and aquasplash will come down and be replaced. So all of that needs to be factored into there. But I think generally just having good soft play is a major one for me. In St Helier, we'll lose that from Fort Regent. It's a really soft play. People just think it's a bunch of kids running about, but it's the precursor for developing really good physically literate children. And if we leave that to the private sector, many of our families are just going to be completely priced out of it. So we need to make sure that we've got a really good public provision that's low cost. And the other thing we need to work out is, in terms of our benefit structure, is how do we get free leisure passes to those that are on housing benefit or income support. And it's not an easy thing to do here because our structure of benefits don't necessarily tell the full story. And with the cost of living, etc., you can have families who are not on any benefits who still really, really struggle. And that's the difficulty in Jersey, is trying to figure out a way to give leisure incentives to the right people. Lady here.
While you continue on what you were saying, because I was working in the benefits departments, I think one of the help to engage more people that are lacking financially would be to encourage more clubs to register childcare providers, because that's the way they can get childcare support even in the sport activities. And I'm also sending an editing Saviour, so to continue the questions on that area. I'm aware of primary schools which already rent out their sport pages, which also bring funds to their own schools, but also encourage people privately and publicly to use those facilities, and we can encourage and support more for that to happen. And also I'm aware that 75% of our secondary schools are in St Saviour. So how can we maybe promote your program in making more awareness with the teenagers, what options they have to continue the sporting activities after they finish secondary?
Yep. I think these are all really, really good points. I think teenagers are particularly difficult. If I ran the sports facilities right now, I would have them staffed Friday and Saturday nights, right up to sort of 10 o'clock at night, and I'd have them free access for all children. And I would have the youth service in there alongside me, and we would be using our sports facilities and opening them up widely for teenagers to just come hang out, chill out, go to the gym, go for a swim if it's got a pool attached to it, And we don't do that here. They're actually shut on a Saturday night. So part of that review will be to do that. Edinburgh Leisure have done this successfully for a long, long time. They charge them £1. They can come along and use any part of the sports centre. The key to that is having the youth workers alongside you. We've just, through the Roar to Sport Lions money that we received from their trip, we've just funded the youth service to provide a youth worker to look at the skate park and really working with the young people who are going to navigate to that skate park and do some really good youth work through sport. And we felt that youth service had the better skill set for that than our sports coaches, although our sports coaches will be alongside them. So it's really about accepting that teenagers don't want a great deal of structure, so you've got to just kind of make it a little bit more come and see. I think working more closely with the youth clubs and using those youth facilities more. We have these youth facilities which are second to none, all in every single parish. But they're closed most of the holidays and they only open 2 or 3 nights a week. So working closely with the youth service is another way that I think we can really tackle that. But if you try and be too structured, there's a pushback, and that's what we need to learn from. One more question. So go to this gentleman here.
At the moment, any new knowledge developments have to put a percentage for arts. Would it be better if we actually put that into some type of sports equipment or something that can be used by the public rather than these arts?
I think that's an excellent question, and one I've been scratching my head with recently, because the Oakfield project needs to put in something for art. And I'm trying to find someone to tell me, well, what is that? You know, what do you want? And actually, I'd rather just give it, and it's a 6-figure sum on the size of Oakfield. I'd rather give it to Holier and say, go and spend 100,000 in your arts department than put a sculpture outside. So that's something I'm actually going to be actively talking about between the college and the school and say, what do you do with this? Because there isn't actually anyone helping developers say, look, here's a structure, this is what we want for the arts, and that's, you know, where your money. It'd be better to pull that money together and use it. But actually, Kirsten's gone now, but Kirsten made a brilliant proposition to have, what was it, so much percentage for the arts. And that's now built into planning as well. Nobody has done that for sport. So if any of you get elected, we would really support you to look at something similar as to has been done with arts and culture. That would make a massive change to sport. And if you can link it to planning and development, then it's not necessarily public cash that is then used. So if there's that sort of planning gain, which I'm just used to having in Scotland, Sport Scotland are a key planning consultee. There isn't a single blade of sports grass taken out of being in Scotland without being replaced. And sometimes I'm asked to give a view on planning, and sometimes I'm not. And that's something we need to do, is make sure that we've got we use the planning system to really tie down things like cost of facilities. So if we're giving a planning obligation for a sports facility, how are we making sure it's affordable to all through the planning thing? So great question, and if you get elected, just come and see me and we'll get going on that. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Better close the